our guest speaker today in time for her introduction. She is Sabina Mohyuddin. Close? She's of Bangladeshi background. However, that's her family background. She grew up in Nashville. She understands American ways, and she has formed the American Muslim Advisory Council to help those people who get into problem areas in the workplace or in school. Bullying's a big problem. Workplace inequities are a big problem, and she's their voice. And with that, I ask her to come up here and let you know about the community. Do you have any need for a computer?
No.
Okay, good. We don't have one. We usually do, but not this minute. Thank you.
No. Thank you, Jean, and I appreciate this opportunity to talk about the Muslim community here in Nashville. So, good afternoon to everybody. Again, my name is Sabina Mohyuddin. I am the Executive Director of the American Muslim Advisory Council, and I'll talk a little bit more about AMAC later, but Jean was right. I was born and raised in Nashville. My parents are originally from Bangladesh, and so you call me a second-generation immigrant, first-generation American. My children are second-generation American. Now I have a grandchild, third-generation American. So it shows kind of the flow of time and how communities grow and change. And so just talking back about the history of the Muslim community in Nashville, and I'm grateful I didn't have to put a presentation together because all this information flows naturally because I kind of live and breathe it, talking about our community across the state, but especially in Nashville. So, there were Muslim community members probably here and there before the 70s, but there really, in the early 70s, two communities started to form. So my parents came here in December of 1970, and I have two older brothers. And at that time, among immigrant Muslims, there were just a couple of families. And obviously there was no mosque, no place to worship. And these families just kind of got together because as Muslims, one of the key purpose of a mosque is to have the Friday prayers, besides the daily prayers. But the Friday prayers are congregational prayers. And so they would just get together, and for a while they were praying at the Black Cultural Center at Vanderbilt. And there was a Muslim Student Association at Vanderbilt that kind of brought also different Muslims. It was a small community, but kind of brought them together. And that's how they kind of started organizing and knowing each other. And then as there were more, Muslim families coming in Nashville, and besides my parents, my family, you probably heard of Muhammad Yunus. Has anyone heard? Nobel Peace Laureate Muhammad Yunus, who's from Bangladesh. And so he actually studied here at Vanderbilt, and he was here in the early 70s and a part of that group kind of starting the Muslim community when after Bangladesh independence, he went back to serve his country. But anyway, they were getting together, and then they realized, okay, our community is growing. We actually need a physical building of our own. And so it was a group of families, leaders that kind of got together, included my father, Dr. A.K.M. Fakhruddin, and then some early families, Dr. Qureshi, my father-in-law, Dr. Mohyuddin, and then Zainab Elberry. So just a group of them who got together, and Zainab would always describe it as she would literally open the phone book and look for Muslim-sounding names to find the names, because it was hard. Life before internet, yeah, I guess we all know here, was very difficult. You had to pull out the white pages and actually look up names. So that's how they kind of tried to, bring in more Muslims. Of course, the universities, there are always Muslim students coming and studying, and with the Immigration Act in 1965, it opened the door for immigrants coming from across the world, and so that really helped have more Muslim students come and study in the U.S. So that's how our community was growing, and so in 1978, they decided, okay, we need to buy a place to call home for our mosque. And as that group was looking for, what's the good sites, at that time, Cat Stevens, the famous rock star, he came to Nashville. Of course, Nashville's Music City, so on business he came to Nashville. But at that time, he hadn't, I don't think he had openly declared that he converted to Islam, but he met with my father, and they went driving around Nashville looking for spaces, places that they can purchase to call the first mosque. And he actually donated. He gave some seed money to the community to buy the first mosque, which they bought in 1979, and that's the Islamic Center of Nashville on 12th Avenue South. Have any of you heard of that or seen that? Yeah. So that it was a small white house on the corner of 12th Avenue South and Sweetbriar. I still remember it growing up, going to that mosque, and then it wasn't until 1989 that they tore it down, and they had rebuilt it into the structure you see today. Looks more like a mosque. And so that is kind of the history, and that pulled in a lot of the immigrant Muslim community, new arrivals who were coming to Nashville, and a place to call home and to find community. At the same time, you have to think about in American history, and especially in the 60s, the rise of Nation of Islam. And so it wasn't, I think 1970 is when the Nation of Islam had one of their mosques there. Now, just to understand the difference between Nation of Islam and Orthodox Islam, those who practice Orthodox Islam, like myself, you don't consider Nation of Islam a sect of Islam. So even though they have Islam in their name, they have beliefs that fundamentally go against the beliefs of Islam. So, but they had established their mosque, and it's like mosque number 60, and they have a special way of naming their mosque, like in 1970. But when the leader of the Nation of Islam, Elijah Muhammad, passed away, his son, Waruddin Muhammad, converted to Orthodox Islam, and he brought a lot of his followers, the followers of Nation of Islam, into mainstream Islam. And so that happened around 1975. And so that's when that mosque became Masjid al-Islam, which is still in existence today. And in 1977, Imam Yusuf Abdullah became the imam of that mosque, and he was imam of that mosque until he passed away, actually, 2 months ago. So, but that was the African American mosque, and so their worshipers were African American. Although, so you have this community, African American Muslims, but then you have immigrant Muslims, and it wasn't like they were in competition with each other, because they were a community already established, and they came into mainstream Islam. At the same time, there was, a need for new immigrants to have a space and to understand the ways that they saw Islam, but they worked together. So Islamic Center in Nashville, usually referred to as ICN, ICN 12 South, and I remember my father, they worked very closely with Imam Yusuf Abdullah. We knew them well. When they had, their original mosque was on Clifton Street, and so when they had issues with their air conditioning or just with the building maintenance, ICN would help raise the funds to help their mosque. And then when we didn't, we had the renovations going on for the mosque and ICN, we'd go worship at the Clifton Street Mosque. So there was, we knew each other. There were members of the Black Muslim community who were serving on the mosque board at Islamic Center Nashville. And Islamic Center Nashville has always been this mosque where everyone feels welcomed in. So you can see that as the community was growing, people were coming from all around the world. ICN kind of served as an open mosque to anyone who wanted to worship there. And so, 1989, ICN creates a new mosque. You have the Masjid al-Islam. And so there were just two mosques. And when they opened the new mosque in the new facility in 1989, I remember thinking, wow, this is so big, and they had classrooms to have, classes for the kids on the weekend, and, we were feeling very proud, like this is the first kind of new mosque made to look like a mosque. And then in the early 90s, there were an influx of refugee communities. So first you saw the influx of Kurdish refugees. And so thinking about the Kurdish community, if you ask them where are they from, they'll say Kurdistan. But if you look at a map, there's no such thing as Kurdistan. And it's because historically other Western countries divided the Middle East in a way that Kurdish community was not a majority in any country. So they lived as minorities in Iraq, Iran, Turkey, and Syria. And in Iraq, there was campaigns by Saddam Hussein with chemical attacks and basically committing genocide against Kurdish people there. And so they were fleeing, and many came as refugees in Nashville in the 1990s. Now, the first Kurdish community members came in the 70s, but that was just few, not too many, but it was in the 1990s you really saw that influx. So some were coming through resettlement agencies who resettled them directly in Nashville, but a lot of them were being resettled across the country. So I had one friend, she talks about how she was resettled in Fargo. Yeah, and she was like, it was so cold. And so people were, settled in different places, but because there was already, even though it was small initially, a Kurdish community here in Nashville, people start getting word, hey, the weather's better in Nashville. And there's there's the Southern hospitality, there are, we're in the Bible Belt, religion is important, and they felt more at home here in Nashville. And that's the story for a lot of Muslim immigrants. How did they find their way to Nashville? But that's how, like, as more Kurds started moving, making kind of their second migration from another city in the U.S. to Nashville, the community was growing, and then more, word came out. Yes, go there. You'll find a community to help you with this journey of resettlement as a refugee. And so, as I said, like in 1989, the ICN mosque seemed so big, and then all of a sudden you just got this large influx of Kurds, and they were coming to the mosque, and you very quickly understood that the mosque was not big enough. And on top of that, you had Somali refugees coming and being resettled. Now we know, like Minneapolis was like where many of the Somalis were resettled. That has the largest Somali community, and then Columbus, Ohio, has a large Somali community. But I think Nashville is like the third or fourth largest Somali community. So here you have influx of Kurds, Somali. So in 1998, the Kurdish community established their mosque, the Saladin Center of Nashville. Has anyone heard of that mosque? Yeah, it's on Nolensville Pike, and close to the Nolensville Harding Place intersection and Elysian Fields. And so that was established in 1998, and then in 2023 there was a historical marker placed there, kind of honoring the Kurdish, growing Kurdish population. So, as they started in 1990s, and now we're probably well over 20,000 Kurds live in Middle Tennessee. And so again, people heard like other Kurds. So the Kurdish population in Nashville is the largest Kurdish population in the U.S. And a lot of times it's being also, I hear it's the largest outside the Middle East. So it is a significant population that even when there were elections in Iraq, they were allowed to vote here in Nashville. Yeah. So that's when Saladin Center was established. And then around that time, a little later, Masjid al-Farouk, which is the mosque that serves the Somali community, was formed. And they used to have a building on 4th Avenue, and now with the growth of downtown and spilling over, now 4th Avenue, they moved to Thompson Lane. It's the old Boys and Girls Club. And so they had really outgrown their initial mosque. And so the Somali community, the estimate is about 5,000 here in Nashville. And so those are that's the major communities, but then we have large South Asian communities, which I'm a part of, from Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, and then you have other African communities outside of the Somalis. So you have Ethiopian Muslims, Muslims from Kenya, and West African countries. And then Afghans, you have a large Afghan community, not as large as out in the West Coast and out in Virginia, but Afghans, you saw the first kind of wave of refugees come in the early 80s because of the Russian invasion of Afghanistan in 1979. And then you saw the second large wave in 2021 with the fall of the Taliban. The fall of the Afghan regime and the takeover by the Taliban If you remember the news reports and people like literally desperate to get out of Afghanistan, hanging on planes. But Nashville at that time received over 500 Afghan refugees. So that community also has grown. And Nashville, before the 1990s, you didn't see large immigrant groups. Even the Hispanic community wasn't very large. It was the 90s where things started to shift and change. And as you go down Nolensville Road, the other name for Nolensville Road is Little Kurdistan. And then there are Muslims from all over the Middle East, from Palestine, Lebanon, Yemeni, Egypt. So it's really a very diverse community here in Nashville, which is not surprising because Islam is the most diverse faith community in the United States. And so even, I would say, for Muslims who migrate here, they're coming from countries where there is not this level of diversity, even in their home countries, and they're seeing a more diverse community. So, I mean, for myself, with my work that I do, I meet Muslims from around the world, and I would say well over 40 countries are represented in our community. You also, you probably may have seen, Malaysia, the government in Malaysia had a understanding with Vanderbilt University, and there were a lot of engineer students came and studied here or did grad school here, but they always went back. So there's not really a Malaysian community, but they were grad students. They no longer have that connection, but it was a very diverse community, and it's still growing. So now we estimate over 60,000 Muslims in Middle Tennessee. And so it has really grown. We have 12 mosques across this region. And so there are mosques like Islamic Center Nashville, 12 South, that is, it's really diverse when you go there. People from around the world, African American Muslims. But then you have mosques like Islamic Center of Tennessee, and that is out in Antioch on Belle Forge Lane. And if you go there, it's very interesting because if you like history, it used to be Belle Forge 8 movie theater. Because I remember, because after I got married, we used to watch movies there, and but they converted it to a mosque, and each theater, they broke it down. They left one theater room as a theater to have movies or showcase documentaries, but they converted the other places. One's a gym, others a classroom, prayer space, and you walk in, and you see the lobby, and it's like, oh yeah, there used to be a concession stand here, and yeah. But it is like some of the mosques, like Saladin Center of Nashville, it was formed specifically to meet the needs of the Kurdish community. So they have services in English, but also in Kurdish. And that's really, especially nowadays, the Kurdish elders who don't know English very well, it's really where they can go and find community. And so, but any of our mosques are open to everyone. So Friday prayers is not like I have to be a member of that mosque to go pray. I can just choose whichever mosque I am working close to, or I live close to, or maybe I heard this religious leader or imam is giving the sermon, and I want to go listen to that sermon. Or the time, the Friday prayers are either at 12 or 1 o'clock in the afternoon on Fridays, obviously, but so whichever is convenient. And so Saladin usually gets people from the Kurdish community. Al Farouk usually gets people from the Somali community, but then you'll see people from other communities come in and pray there. But again, you're more likely to, like Al Farouk will have sometimes programming in Somali for the community members. Islamic Center of Tennessee is very diverse, and it's also, it's location based. So people who are living out in Antioch will more likely go there, or out in Smyrna or Laverne will go to that mosque, and you see Somali, Middle Eastern, South Asians. There's also a community Uzbeks from Uzbekistan. So it's very diverse. And then other mosques, of course, you have Masjid al-Islam. You have another African American mosque on Jefferson Street, Muslim American Cultural Center. And then Islamic Center Nashville made a second facility out in Bellevue. So Islamic Center Nashville, Bellevue Mosque. And their campus, they also have an Islamic school, Nashville International Academy. And then you have in Williamson County a mosque, in Murfreesboro a mosque, in Clarksville they have a mosque there, and then in Hendersonville there's a new mosque. So and then in Murfreesboro Pike there's another mosque. So you see it's kind of spread around to where people live, and sometimes it's just the convenience of where you live, but sometimes you want services in your own language, then you go to a particular mosque. And so I think it's beautiful, and it gets you to learn, even though we're all Muslims, the flavor of Islam we practice and our cultural traditions differ. So it's always wonderful to learn more about different communities. So that's a little bit history, just kind of going into the mosque. But now talk a little bit about our community and how it relates to American Muslim Advisory Council. So the American Muslim Advisory Council, we are a statewide organization, and we empower the Muslim community through civic engagement, community building, and media relations. And so we were founded in 2012, but I'll give you some context. In 2010, there were certain things was happening in the community. First of all, the Tennessean published an article, and it was, "Is Islam a Threat?" And it was a front page Sunday article, and the whole premise of the article was problematic. I mean, I literally read it and wrote a letter to the editor within an hour, and had it published, because they were interviewing a rabbi, they interviewed a professor, they interviewed a pastor who was a known Islamophobe, who had said things in the past against our community, and they made a story out of it. And the premise is, think of, you're just going to look at Muslim community in the lens of, are they good or bad? Are they a threat to our community? And not really get to know who our community is. But that was early 2010, and then, actually I should have mentioned in 2008, the Islamic Center of Columbia was burned to the ground by white supremacists. And they were caught, and they were, they were charged and sentenced, but yeah, it was burned to the ground. And that was kind of the first major, I'd say major, I mean, other things happened, but major incident against our community. And then, 2010, you have this article, there was vandalism at Masjid al-Farouk, and somebody drew a cross and said, "Muslim, go home," on the side of the building. And then in May 2010 is when the Islamic Center Murfreesboro, who were renting some buildings to have their prayers and weekend classes. They bought a new piece of land and they wanted to build a mosque, so they had to go in front of the commission to get approval. And they got the approval, no problem, but it was midterm elections. And the candidates, one of them in particular, used the approval to build the mosque as their, talking point that, we're bringing in terrorists. We're allowing a terrorist training camp to be built in Murfreesboro. And so that started this huge backlash against the Muslim community in Murfreesboro. And there were 2 lawsuits brought by an Islamophobic group against the city for approving the building of that mosque. And in that time, there was construction equipment that was vandalized, and they faced a lot. There were terrible, there were protests against the community, but at the same time there were counter protests, people coming out to support the community, and there was some really good support and allyships and friendships formed during that time for people who really, spoke out in support of the Muslim community. But they really faced 2 years of lawsuits until finally they were built, and the U.S. Attorney's Office kind of got involved and said, because one of the charges one of the talking points against the building of the mosque was Islam is not a religion, it's a political ideology, and that's what people use to kind of put down Islam. And the U.S. Attorney's Office had to write an amicus brief saying, no, Islam is considered a religion in the United States. And so they were finally able to open in 2012. But before that, 2011, the state rep from Murfreesboro, Bill Ketron, introduced a bill in the state legislature, and we referred to it as the anti-Sharia bill, kind of throwing this fear that Muslims are taking over, they're going to impose Sharia on everyone else, when Sharia is like Catholic canon law. It's how I practice, it's the rulings on how I practice Islam. It's not about me trying to impose anything on anyone else. But nobody understands what it is. They can throw the word out and confuse people and scare people. But really, the bill was a material support bill. So it was trying to find a way to freeze funding, freeze the financial, whatever money that mosques had to build. So try to stop the building of Islamic State of Murfreesboro. But what the supporters of this bill did not understand was, what they assumed is the Muslim community in Tennessee is small. Like, we can introduce this bill, it's just going to pass. What they didn't know that we were strong, we were going to organize, and that's what we did. At that time, I actually lived in Tullahoma, Tennessee. I lived there for 16 years, and the state rep that sponsored the bill was my representative, Jen Matheny. And so we pushed back hard. We galvanized our community, we brought in our allies, and we showed up at the state legislature in the hundreds, and we said, no, you're not gonna walk over our rights like this. And we basically defeated that bill. But what we understood is that, we have all these mosques across the state, but mosques are busy with supporting the spiritual well-being of their congregants. They're not really equipped to handle this kind of attack from the state legislature. And that's how we founded American Muslim Advisory Council, because it was important for the community to have an organization who could pay attention to what's happening in the legislature or in government. And we don't focus on the federal level. We focus more on the state and local level, and and how they're treating Muslims, and what is their understanding of our communities. And so that's how we founded AMAC. I'm a founding board member, but in 2017 I stepped down from the board to help lead AMAC. But so the work we've done a lot of work around pushing back against Islamophobic attacks and discrimination, whether it's workplace discrimination, institutional discrimination, or bullying in school. So we talk and have conversations with MNPS all the time, and trying to see what's the best way that MNPS can support our students. In 2024, we did a survey of Muslim students across the state, and we published it last year, and we found that 46% of Muslim students reported being bullied. And then 100% of the elementary students said they felt a sense of belonging at school, which was great. But 47% said they had to, they had hidden part of their Islamic identity at some point. So, your sense of belonging comes at what price? And so trying to understand what our students are going through, and being able to advocate for them to have those safe spaces at school. So that's part of the work we do. We also do cultural competency training, so that nonprofits or corporations or government entities understand our community and what are the best ways to reach our communities. I feel like a well-resourced community is one that thrives. And so making sure that our community gets the resources it needs to thrive. And so that kind of falls under that community building. We connect with all the mosques and see what they need, especially in terms of security. Now with our 5th congressional district, Ogle's comments against the Muslim community, making sure that our communities are not facing backlash, because there's always threats, comments made in social media. A year and a half ago, somebody actually threatened to shoot up one of our mosques, and that case is in the federal courts. So really thinking about the security of our community. So that's and then we have a youth leadership program helping build the next generation of leaders in the Muslim community. So that's kind of the community building aspect of AMAC, but then a major aspect is the civic engagement. We understand that really you have to be civically engaged, you have to be talking to your elected leaders, and you have to be talking to candidates, knowing who they are, so they can see us and see what our issues are and understand our community, and we can hold them accountable, when they're not serving our communities. And so getting our community out to vote is a very important aspect of our work that we've done. And I'm sure all of you know our founding chair of AMAC is Councilwoman Zulfat Suera, and that really galvanized, when she was running for election, really galvanized the community to go out and vote, because it was like, oh, I see myself represented in her, and she's amazing. They know that she fights for everyone. And so that was really like a turning point in terms of really getting our community more engaged. And so AMAC helps put together candidate forums and bringing candidates to our community to understand who we are, and then but also for our community to see that candidates or elected officials are not someone out of reach. It's actually someone you can talk to and share your ideas about different issues. And so that is a very important part of our work, the advocacy we do on behalf of students, but also at the state legislature. So since the anti-Sharia bill in 2011, we know there have been other anti-immigrant bills. There have been bills specifically against the Muslim community. This year, there was a slew of bills that we had to push back. And so we have our Muslim Day on the Hill. We had over 100 people go to the Capitol and advocate on different bills. And so we are getting, and I see the second generation, third generation kids, they are very much, they're active, and they are also demanding that their voices be heard. And I think it's wonderful to see that. And then the third part of our work is media relations. So you think back, 2010, that article, Is Islam a Threat? So this is always something we work with reporters, with news agencies, to make sure that Muslims are telling their own stories, and they're not, creating stories about our community, because what we've seen is when that oftentimes the stories about our community, they feed into the stereotypes about our community. And so when we get to speak for ourselves and to see Muslims beyond the framework of immigrant, beyond the framework of terrorism, but seeing us as valuable, see us for our valuable contributions to our communities. And so we're always working with that and making sure our stories are told. I wanted to mention, I think it was 2015, 2016, there was in the Tennessean, and I believe it was the Community Foundation had helped with that, but there was The Power of Nashville was printed, and there was some backlash against the Muslim community, thinking about the elections in 2016. And so it was something that Nashvillians signed on saying they will not tolerate hate in our community. And it was very powerful because, it was really taking a stand in support of the Muslim community. And honestly, we have gone back to that statement of support when there was a so-called security conference happening in Nashville, but all the invited speakers were known Islamophobes, people who we knew went after our community. And so we leveraged those connections to say, hey, you signed this, are you going to help speak up for our community? Because we strategize, we speak out, but there are times where our voices aren't as effective if we're the only voice speaking up for our community. And we need our allies to step up and speak up. And so because everyone knows, of course, we don't like it when Ogle says what he says, right? But having our allies speak up and show us support, it doesn't just mean the world to us as a community, but it also helps other people think twice about joining in that rhetoric. So I just wanted to share that we've had in Nashville great collaboration, great support from the community, and we really appreciate that. So I know I spoke a long time, and if anyone has any questions, I'd love to answer. So.
Have you considered running for office?
how much are you going to donate? That's the question. No.
I lived in Somalia for a year and traveled in the Islamic world and taught Islam in college and did in 2004 did when I was working for the sheriff's office, I did a training for them. Part of it was about studying Islam. And I've just been amazed of the stupidity that's coming out of people's mouths. That business with the mosque in Murfreesboro. The people next door apparently thought that you were vampires. They put crosses all over.
Yeah.
Playing Wolfbane, whatever. And then the recent comments of our idiot congressman.
Yeah.
They're like seriously. I think just in general we need a better civics education. Better civic education in this country.
Yeah.
Better history education, better education in geography and all the social sciences. It seems to me the 2016 election should have been a Sputnik moment.
And in fact, our state has gone backwards in terms of how much religion is taught in schools. So it was around 2016 that, I mean, every so often they update social studies curriculum, and there was pushback, and again, it was coordinated, there was Islamophobes involved in it, that and it was actually, I think, White County, Tennessee. Some parent complained about, why is my child learning about Islam? And with that came the whole movement to change social studies curriculum. And so their argument was 7th graders are not mature enough to learn about other religions. And so they cut back the amount of coverage of other religions there is in social studies curriculum. So, and we know, like, there's things going on in Texas now, you know, whatever gets passed as curriculum in Texas makes its way around the whole country, and they're trying to, again, reduce the amount of information children are learning about religions. And so we're just going to see more ignorance.
One of the first things Bill Lee did as governor, he appointed 2 Islamophobes
Yeah.
to state boards.
Lori Cardozo Moore.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that former state senator from Wilson County, I can't remember her name.
Yeah.
She's on the parole board.
Yeah. We advocated against Lori Cardozo Moore being on the textbook commission. Yep.
You talked about going to the legislature in a large group and getting something done. Do you feel like that can happen anymore?
So we count our success very so this year, I'd say the legislation, there was one that that said from state documents, you can't say West Bank anymore. You have to say Judea and Samaria, which is ridiculous on all fronts. I won't even go into it, but that's one that we were lobbying against, and you know, there were some members, I think in Knoxville, 2 members who because their constituents pushed back so much, they voted against it. It passed. It's hard not to, keep from bad legislation passing in this, far-right legislature, but sometimes being able to pull a few people on your side, we'll count those as a win. Otherwise, it would be too depressed. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the breakdown, because what little I know of Islam is that there are different types of Islam, Sunni,
Yeah.
Shiite. And tell us, the Nashville community, is that under one group, or is it all mixed up here too?
So Nashville is mostly Sunni, and I think worldwide it's like 90% Sunni anyway. But But I know there are two smaller mosques. I mean, in Nashville, or smaller communities that are Shia. So, I mean, Shia, and the difference between Sunni and Shia, honestly, is mostly political, not so much, on religious, on theological. But Shia, I mean, Iraq has Shia, of course, Iran, and some other places around the Middle East, there are Shia communities. Besides that, I really don't know. I mean, there could be here and there, but those are the main two ones, and those would you probably see here, but it's mostly Sunni.
Do they have a adversarial relationship here like they might have in the Middle East?
So it's interesting because I'm from Bangladesh. There aren't any Shia in Bangladesh, and then I grew up here, and so I never understood the adversarial, politics that you see in the Middle East happening right now. There are some people who brings that politics here and has that kind of relation, but there's not as much of interaction. For the most part, Muslims come here. We're a minority group. We're not going to go after each other on those small differences. Yeah.
You mentioned candidates, and this is an election year. Do you have a political arm, a PAC, or anything?
No, we don't have a C4, and it's hard because our community, we tell them, go out and vote, and they're like, who do we vote for? And I'm like, I can't tell you, like, ask somebody else, but yeah, there used to be a Muslim 501c4, but it's hard to keep a 501c4 going, so we just get people out to vote. Okay, I know who. Okay, sorry.
With all the different places that these immigrants have come from,
Mhm.
how do the mosques or the different groups, how do they help them assimilate
Mhm.
into our culture, the language? I mean, because they're all
Yeah.
they're from
Right.
so they're all so different.
So in 2021, when you saw the influx of Afghan refugees, AMAC never did any refugee support work before 2021. But when Afghans were coming here, we got involved. And one of the reasons I got involved is to just make sure you have these different resettlement agencies that weren't working together. They were working in isolation, but to help them understand the needs of this large community coming in a very short amount of period of time. And at that time, to have within 5-6 months, 500 Afghans come, they didn't have the capacity really to support that large influx of Afghans at that time. And so us being able to tell them, okay, if you really want to help them, you need to understand their culture and how things work. And the mosque provides a community so that we were helping Afghans go to Islamic Center of Nashville and Bellevue because there were already an Afghan community who worshiped there. And so connecting with communities that have been here longer is the best way to understand how to adapt to American society. Learning from people who raise their kids, because as immigrants, as refugees, you've lost so much. And then when you see that you come here and your children aren't adopting all your cultural ways or religious ways, you feel a sense of loss. And so how do you navigate that and not live in this kind of fear? But as kids grow up here, they have their cultural background, but they become American Muslims. And so it's really connecting with existing communities here, and the mosque can kind of be that place where they can come and see and join. But a lot of it just fall on, let's see, elderly, I mean, not elderly, but community members who've been here longer. I think we're, okay.
You mentioned bullying in high school. What about your community getting to participate after sports teams like volleyball and
Yeah.
soccer? Is there any resistance to that, or can they just join teams and be treated as equals with everybody else? I'm just wondering if you can speak to that.
So there are a lot of Muslims who are playing in sports teams. We have Muslims in football. We have girls who wear hijab, the scarf, and are playing sports. I honestly, when I was growing up, and I was at J.T. Moore, and then Hillsborough High School, and I was the first hijabi girl in metro schools. And so, you know, I was thinking about sports, but my mother would never ever let me. I was too much of a tomboy for her taste. So, but I've seen it was 2020 or 2021. I forgot. There was a girl, 9th grader at Valor Collegiate, that wore a hijab while playing volleyball. And one day before the game, the referee said, "No, you can't play. You didn't get the permission required by TSAA." And so we fought against that, and they changed the rules so that they can wear the hijab, because some of it was like, oh, well, it's a safety concern. Well, so no, it's not. It was just a necessary barrier. But we've moved, we've changed that, and so yeah, we see Muslim boys and girls doing sports.
One thing about driver's licenses, you couldn't wear the hijab if you had to look for your driver's license picture way back.
So, I
I think I remember something about that.
I got my driver's license, 88 or 1988. I didn't have problem with hijab. Now, that being said, we hear every so often that whoever's working at the DMV is like, oh, you can't wear that. And I think I was told that at one point, and I just said, well, I wear this for religious reasons, and it sometimes just depends on who's there, whether they're like, oh, okay, you know, and let you go, or they give you problem. But they can't deny it. They can't deny it on a passport picture. But on a passport picture, you have to write a letter to them that certifying kind of you wear it for religious reasons out in public. Yeah. But it was also an issue with with our sheriff's department, because if a Muslim was taking, arrested and had a mugshot, they were making them take the hijab off years ago. And after we pushed back and threatened lawsuit, Davidson County changed their policy. But we've seen more recently, like in Rutherford County, then out in Knoxville, where they did make Muslim women take off their hijab, and then they got sued and they had to pay. So.
Have you made the trip, the Hajj, to Mecca?
Yes, in 1992. So it's been it's been quite a while. Yeah, it's definitely an experience that you'll never forget in your life. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.